Ay 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, ay, ay. Di-di-da-da-da-da-da. Ay, ay, da-da-da-da-da-da. Di-di-da, ay, ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 oh, oh. Ay, 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 oh, oh. Ay, 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 oh. Welcome to the Lunch and Learn, the Soul Food. This afternoon's learning is dedicated to the neshama, to the soul of Laurel Turk Borwick Tzipia Bat Malka, and to all of those who are needed healing. We left off last week with a discussion at the end of the Hakdama, of the introduction of the Mechaber, of the Ramchal, of the author of Mesilat Yesharim, the path of the ones with integrity, the straight path, which we'll come to in a moment. And at the end of last week, we were discussing on page, I think it was 13, the 14 and 13, 13 and, I'm sorry, 12 and 13, that the Ramchal introduced us to he introduced us to the Braita, to the teaching from Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. V'nei kol ele klalim tzrichim perush gadol. He said on page 12, and all of these, the 5 categories that he had introduced earlier, which was to love God, to fear God, whatever that means. We said we were going to talk about that. To be someone who is imitating God, who's holech bidrachav, who's walking in God's ways, and also the shmirat mitzvot and the tmimut alev, having the shlemut alev, having the wholesomeness of the heart, and the wholesomeness of the heart, and the shmirat kol mitzvot, and observing the mitzvot. He says that all of these things require a tremendous amount of effort and tremendous like inquiry and extensive interpretation. All of these things need to be interpreted well and need to be pulled out and teased apart. What does it mean? What do we actually do? What's the path? And he says on the last paragraph, I found that our sages shekalalu chalakim ha'ele b'seder v'chiluk said I found amongst the sages who gathered together all of these various categorized these elements into a different, more detailed formulation and arranged them in an order. He says that there's an order in which these things can be acquired appropriately, that there's some kind of seder. And we talked about this a little bit last week, that the notion of having a seder, that something is misudar, something has an order, it's not chaotic. The sense that the Ramchal was seeking, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto was seeking some categorization, some kind of way of grouping together in a way that could be replicated and taught. The spiritual evolution, spiritual excellence. Like in a sense, the Ramchal, who learned this from his own teacher, was saying that in the Jewish tradition, there is, these 5 basic ways of approaching our service to God. There is, of course, in the Jewish tradition, there is being faithful to the mitzvot. And there's also shmirat mitzvot, there's also shlemut alev, being wholesome. But then, and there's ahava and yirah, and all of these loving and fearing, all of these various ways of approaching our spiritual work in the world. But the Ramchal wasn't satisfied with just having those 5 various divisions or 5 categories as a general category. The Ramchal wanted a much more orderly and precise way of approaching avodah, of service, of spiritual work. The Ramchal was desiring to have that, and it's beautiful that the Ramchal wanted that, but it's also clearly something that we can speculate. Maybe the Ramchal himself was somebody who needed order. It could be that he was taught that way. All of his books, all of the Ramchal's books, follow a very similar precision, a desire for precision and an elegance and an aesthetic measuring of various qualities. The Ramchal was somebody who had that. It seems clear, but also his teacher was an encyclopedic individual. His teacher came from a world where things were placed in their appropriate place, intellectually, spiritually. So the Ramchal went looking, and he found amongst the Chachamim, he found amongst our sages, a precise way of ordering, giving seder to the work that would bring one to those 5 categories of love and fear, of walking God's ways, of having wholeness of heart, and being an observant individual. Those 5 categories, he found a ladder and an ordered sequential unfolding that would be the easiest way to achieve what the Ramchal thinks spiritual life is all about. And he found it in a teaching from Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, in a Braita, in a saying from the Mishnah, from outside the Mishnah, but Mishnaic material. Huma shamru b'Braita, huv'a b'mekomot shonim b'shas. V'chad mehem b'perek lifnei dehen. It's a Braita, it's a teaching that is brought in a number of different places, a number of different sources within the Talmud. And he quotes one from the tractate dealing with idolatry, which is itself interesting. Why did he choose that one of all of the ones? And Mikan Amar Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. From here, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair said, or taught, Torah mivi'ah lidei zihirut, that Torah will bring one to watchfulness. Zihirut mivi'ah lidei zrizut, and zihirut, when one is watchful, that will bring one to alacrity or to some kind of zariz means to be zealous. Zrizut mivi'ah lidei nikiyut, and that zealousness will bring one to cleanliness, nikiyut. Nikiyut mivi'ah lidei prishut, and the cleanliness will bring one to separation or being paresh. Prishut mivi'ah lidei tahara, and prishut will bring one to purity, tahara. Tahara mivi'ah lidei chasidut, and tahara, purity, will bring one to saintliness. Chasidut mivi'ah lidei anava, and purity or saintliness rather will bring one to humility. Anava mivi'ah lidei yirat hachet, and humility will bring one to the fear of sin. Yirat hachet mivi'ah lidei kedusha, and the fear of sin will bring one to holiness. And kedusha mivi'ah lidei ruach hakodesh, and holiness will bring one to ruach hakodesh, Holy Spirit. And ruach hakodesh mivi'ah lidei tchiyat hametim, and holiness, the Holy Spirit rather, will lead to the revival of the dead. Here is 10 stages that will bring one all the way to the power to revive the dead. 10 stages, one built upon the other. 10 moments, 10 practices. And the operative word here is mivi'ah lidei, that will bring to. It's not that it's automatic. It isn't that there is an immediate, right, that one births the other immediately, but they are bringing one along the path. These are the 10 ways, the 10 paths. Now, anyone who's ever studied any Kabbalah, if you've ever studied Kabbalah, you know that that the number 10 has very profound meaning in the Kabbalah. It also has very profound meaning in general in the Jewish tradition. The 10 utterances that created the world, the 10 quote unquote commandments, the 10 asara dibrot, the 10 spoken things, and the 10 sfirot in the Kabbalistic tradition are the building blocks of all creation, are built upon the 10 sfirot, one thing leading to the other. A contemporary Kabbalist wrote that in general there is the way up and the way down in the Kabbalah, the way from above to below and the way from below to above, and that it seems clear from the Braita of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair that he's dealing with moving from below to above, meaning he begins with the lowest, right, the lowest and simplest and most obvious holy practice, which is Torah, and that Pinchas ben Yair then moves up the ladder in increasing complexity and increasing power, all the way until we reach Ruach HaKodesh and Chiyat HaMeitim. The way this contemporary Kabbalist also said that there's the way of going from above to below, and there's a way of going ba'alachson, which means diagonally in this Sfirot, moving this way, not proceeding this way, but moving this way and then up, this way and then up. The way of moving up the stairs is more exhausting. It's faster to go straight up, but it's exhausting. You can get tired very quickly. If you go diagonally, it's almost you take some of the pressure off of that steep incline. And so the way through the Sfirot that moves from below to above in a straight way can be exhausting and taxing and tiring, but it's also a surefire way of making it to the top. There's sure that there is a sense of progress, there's a sense of growth. The energy of moving from below to above, milatata la'ela, going from below to above, is the energy of working from malchus to yisod, from yisod to netzach and hod, and so on, going all the way up the ladder of the sfirot. And in that way, moving Torah mivi alidei zihirut, zihirut mivi alidei zrizut, zrizut mivi alidei nikiyut, and so on, moving up the ladder. Having a sense of a game plan, a sense of where I am in my spiritual growth. And the way of moving diagonally is very similar, except that one takes a bit of a longer, shorter way. One goes longer, but also one might have more longevity. It's one pulls the intensity and reduces it slightly. It takes a little bit more time, but one is still moving from below to above. But the energy of above to below is very, very interesting. What would it mean to build a house from above to below, to put the roof on first and then build below? To begin with Keter, begin with Chochmah and Bina and Das, to begin with all of the very high exalted things and then move our way below. How does that really work exactly? How would one begin from above and go to below? Begin with Ruach HaKodesh and then go to Torah? I think that it's clear that I know my experience has been that to some degree it's possible. It's almost like the well-known quote, I think, of if you build castles in the air, right? If you build castles in the air, don't worry. Don't destroy them, just build things beneath them, bring foundations. If you had a very powerful opening, right? If you had a very powerful spiritual experience, that's in some way analogous to have an explosion of Keter and Chochmah and Bina and Das. You can start on the highest place. It's an awakening. You're already there. You have a peak experience. You go on a weekend and you get it. You know, your spiritual life is created in the bat of an eye. But then you have to still go back and build the structures beneath it, the foundations of it. The foundations of your spiritual life must be grounded in the day-to-day work, because we can't hold on to Keter, we can't hold on to crown and the highest regions of spiritual work until we ground them in a practice that trains us, so that the states of awareness that we have become traits of awareness, that the things that happen momentarily are integrated in such a way that they are alive in us. That's the work. So the way from above to below is the way of beginning. You begin on the roof, and then you go back and you start filling in the details. One way to do that is, if you have a roof, you have to build foundations. You have to have pillars to hold up the roof while you build the lower levels. So Rabbi Itamar Schwartz writes that the amudim, that the foundations, the pillars that hold up the roof, right, of the higher levels of awareness, the higher levels of consciousness, is emunah, is faith. That without faith, without some powerful faith to hold us while we do the work, then the whole thing can come down. It really resonated for me when I read that, because I know that for some of us, the spiritual life, it often begins with a very powerful awakening. It's not the usual way. For me, at least, my experience hasn't been that people, I hear stories like this. People start and they go one day to yoga, they dive in a little bit every day, nothing's happening. They're dating, basically. They actually act in a very organized way, the way that the Ramchal is talking about, the organized. I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and first I got my high school diploma, and then my college, and then my master's and PhD, and then I'm teaching, and it's like they work in this really beautiful layer cake, 10-layer cake. One thing is built upon the other. It's not always the case. In fact, it's usually not, in my experience. Usually people have a very deep opening, awakening. We get to Ruach HaKodesh, like we're flying. We have been awakened from the dead. We have the power. We see that the whole world is unified, that there's nothing but God, there's nothing but spirit, there's nothing but a unified experience. Sometimes we have that opening. It can be through meditation. It can be a moment of clarity walking in the street somewhere. It can happen at any moment. And then if we don't have faith that what we saw was true, if we don't have faith in that, then going back to do the laundry after the ecstasy can be, we think, oh my God, how many years am I going to spend in the laundry room? In the bills and the showing up at class and being bored. The monotony, as all students of Torah know, after the mountain of Sinai and after the revelation at Sinai, the next parsha, the next reading is all about the details of religious life. It's the drudgery, the monotony. After the ecstasy, the boredom. There's another book we could write, the laundry. It's like, how do I get through the days of the first 7 or 8 sections of this? Torah mevi'ah lidei zehirut, and zehirut mevi'ah lidei zrizut. Like Torah brings to carefulness, watchfulness, and watchfulness will lead to a life of nikiyut, of cleanliness. You'll be mindful of all your actions and how you speak. But those aren't the rarefied places of glimpsing the divine, let's say. So this Rabbi Itamar Schwartz says we have to have an amud, we have to have a pillar of faith. Tzadik be'emunato yichyeh, bacha bakuk v'hemidan alachat. And there's one amud called faith. And the faith, maybe not just the faith in God, but the faith in the vision that we had that sustains us during the winters, during the difficult days, during the times when things are not clear, right? So there's the way of below to above, and then there's the way from above to below, which is everything happens all at once. And then we have the faith in our own vision and our own experience. We have the faith, we have the belief, we have the strength that is the amud, the center pillar, the pillar of strength, that vision will be reattained at some point. They'll be reborn. And I'm going to go back and build the floors one below, one at a time. That's awakening from below to above, from above to below, and in diagonal. And so the Ramchal comes along and says, I'm going to give you an organized way. 10 pieces. V'hinei. Al pi habraita hazot iskamti lechaber chiburi zeh lelamed. Le'atzmi. According to this teaching, this rabbinic teaching on page 14 now, on the basis of this braita, this Mishnaic teaching, ancient teaching from Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, I have undertaken to write this work in order to teach myself He was learning his own book. I love that. He's learning his own book. ולהזכיר לאחרים תנאי עבודה שהשלמה למדרגותיהם, and to remind others the conditions for perfect divine service according to their gradations. ואבאר בכל אחד מהם ענייניו וחלקיו או פרטיו, הדרך לקנות אותו ומהם מפסידיו. I will explain in each one of these conditions what is the depth of the matter, what are its details, what are its divisions, what does each of these mean, and what are the obstacles to attaining and acquiring that trait, and what are the ways to acquire it. He says, I will read it, and therefore I will read this treatise, and it will remind me, right, that all of those who are pleased to do something, read it in order to learn to fear God and not to forget our duty before God. Like the reading of this should be pleasing. Reading these things should remind us and help ground us and help root us in our responsibilities, what we are able to respond to, our response-able capacities to live wholesome Jewish, universal, spiritual lives for the sake of ourselves and the planet. And that we don't forget what our what our chovah is. You know, I want to say, and I don't want to be on a soapbox, but we have lost touch in the Jewish world and in the larger ethos of the postmodern world what responsibility might mean, what chov means, right? When we owe a debt. To whom do we owe a debt? Right? The notion that I owe my parents something, or that I owe God something, or that I owe the world something. It's a very difficult concept for us to integrate, to grok. But we have a responsibility. We have a chov. We have a debt that we owe to some degree for this life that we've been given. In the Buddhist world, our incarnation, the incarnation of a soul into a body, is a precious incarnation. We say, wow, how lucky am I to have been reborn to do the work that I can do. At yesterday's funeral for our dear friend Laurel, I mentioned that one of her sayings, one of the things that she said frequently was, as long as I'm alive, I will. And then she would fill in the sentence. As long as I'm alive and I can play and I can dance, I'll dance. As long as I'm alive and I can do Zumba, I'll do Zumba. As long as I'm alive and I can do good in the world, that's what I'll do while I'm alive. As long as I have life, breath in me, I have a responsibility and I have a debt to pay. And I'll pay it joyfully. So he says that we have a debt, we have a chovah. And that which our physicality, our physical, our material existence, it removes it from our hearts. Right, and that our reading and our reminding ourselves, our willingness to learn this over and over again, and to be reminded, will counteract or counterbalance what will naturally happen in terms of our forgetting. Right, that which naturally, the earthiness of our nature will remove from our heart, reading and contemplation will summon to our consciousness and awaken us to what is incumbent upon us. And may God be with us and be with our aspirations and keep our feet from stumbling. And may there be fulfilled in us the supplication of the psalmist, the beloved of his God. He's referring, of course, here to King David. Hareini Hashem u'darkecha, illuminate for me, teach me, God, your ways. Ahalech be'amitecha, I will walk in your truth. Unify my heart, make one my heart, to know your name, to fear your name. Amen, Ken Yehi Ratzon. Amen, may it be your will. And that's the way the beautiful Ramchal, the beautiful Moshe Chaim Luzzatto finishes his classic introduction to his classic work by saying, God, Watch over us as we do this work, as we climb the ladder, strengthen our feet to climb, guard our hearts from slipping, right? Guard our hearts to be unified with you. Teach us. That's all we want, is to know your way and your truth, so that we may stand in awe of the mystery of this creation. That mystery be born in us. And unless we end a very beautiful long introduction to an incredible book, I want to begin now for the next 4 or 5 minutes, the first chapter, which is titled B'Ve'ur Klal Chovat Adam Be'olamo, the explanation concerning human being's duty in the world. What is our chovah? We're going to come back to this responsibility piece. What is it we're doing here in the world? What is the debt that we owe? What is expected of us? And this, one of the most famous lines in all of Jewish literature. Yisod HaChasidus v'shorosh avoda hatmima. The foundation of Chassidut, as you can see, and the foundation of saintliness and the root of divine service. Right? In the root of wholesome, pure, complete divine service. What is the root? What is the foundation of all of that? We have this thing called saintliness, and we have avodat mima, meaning perfect or wholesome service for God. What is the foundation and the root? What is that? And if you look at the first four words, the first letter of each word spells God's name, right? That's a common trope in this literature, in Kabbalistic literature as well, Hasidic literature. Yud He Vav He, an allusion to that. What is at the root of discovering the divine, right? Big words, big sentence. The foundation and the root. Hu she'yitbarer v'yit'amet etzel adam ma chavato be'olamo. Hu she'yitbarer v'yit'amet, that it becomes clear and recognizable to me, to the human being, what is my responsibility in the world. Ulama tzarich she'yasim mabato u'megamato b'chol asher hu amel kol yemei chayav. What is worthy of my mabat, my perspective, where I look, and my goal, my aspiration, my megama, where I'm headed towards in all of my toil. He begins with a simple assumption, which I spent, by the way, it's amazing to read this. All of you, I think there are 21 people watching this. I don't know who else is going to watch this during the week, but one of the most famous TED Talks is by a guy named Simon Sinek, I think it is. He wrote a book called Start With Why. The companies, corporations, individuals, families need to have a why statement. Like what's going on? What's the purpose of your company? What's your purpose? And that if you lose sense of the why, then the how and the what are already confused. And we spend way too much time on the what and the how, and we lose sight of what the why is. And he has a whole company, and I was one of the people who works for him, came and did teaching for rabbis here in New York. Every organization, every person, everything needs a why to live for. What's the why of your life? I was thinking about wise guys. We're all wise guys. Like, what's your why? Right? And if you can figure out your why, then a lot of the how and the what will fall into place. Or you can put up with a lot of the how and the what if you have a why to live for, which is, of course, Viktor Frankl's brilliant insight while he was a prisoner during the Holocaust, and was written about in his book Man's Search for Meaning. If you have a why to live for, you can put up with any how. And we might say more figuratively, you'll choose the how based on the why that you have. And the what will all be dependent upon the why. And so thus begins a book on spiritual life. Like, in order to understand what we're supposed to do, we have to understand why we're here. That's what the Ramchal says. Yisod HaChasidut v'shorosh avodat mima hu she'yitbarer v'yit'amet etzel kol ben adam ma chovato ulama tzarich she'yasim mabato megamato b'chol asher hu amel kol yemei chayav. Like, what are you here for? What? You have a lot of energy. Why are you doing this? What is the why to which everything else should orient itself? So, and he won't prove to you. He won't He's not going to engage in a proof, but he's going to say something like this, which is, we are spiritual beings having a human experience, essentially. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. We are spiritual beings, and our purpose in life is to serve God. And by that, I don't mean in the antiquated service model, but that our greatest why is that we were placed here, in other words, to serve God. He says, "V'hinei ma shehorunu chachamenu zalhu, sh'adam lo nivra ela litaneg el Hashem le'anot miziv shchinato." Now, he doesn't begin with, here's your purpose. You're Jewish, and your purpose is to keep the Torah, to keep the mitzvot, serve God because God is the ultimate commander in chief, and he commanded you, and you're her, right? You work for God, as it were. You're a part of that world. That would be like a much more classic Jewish approach. Like, what do you mean? Your purpose in the world is what God said. Keep mitzvot, keep the Torah, live a Jewish life. He begins from a completely different place. He says that according to the rabbis, I was created in order to enjoy the radiance of the divine love. Sounds new agey. It's kind of old agey. We are, each of us here, created to love and to be loved by God, to experience the radiance and the fullness of the divine love. Now, how do you get there? That's going to be, he's going to build a construct, an edifice. He's going to build a conceptual frame to show that the only way that we can fully and experience that divine love is by creating a vessel to receive it. But that's the way he's going to introduce the ladder, and that's the way that I wanted to conclude today's class. The Ramchal introduces us to a very ordered way of moving up the ladder, which will begin next chapter, but now he wants to make clear what our purpose is in the world. What is our purpose? Our purpose is to le'anot miziv hashchina, to experience the presence of God's love in this world, in this lifetime. And how do we get there? If that's our why for living, what's the way to achieve that? And that he'll flesh out. But for now, maybe we don't need the whole ladder. Maybe we can just experience it now for 10 seconds, what it is to feel God's love surrounding us, permeating our being in our hands and our feet, in our eyes. Yesod HaChasidut, the foundation of saintliness, V'shoresh ha'avodah hatmima, and the root of all of our wholesome gardening in the garden of God is to be able to sit and bask in God's love. I bless you with a day where that is self-evident, that you have an awareness of the energies above and the energies below meeting together. And I hope that I hope to see you soon. And I also wanted to say that someone wrote an email to me saying, wouldn't it be better if this were interactive? If somebody knows how to make this a more interactive shiur and not have it be 2 hours long, I'm open to suggestions. I would much prefer to hear comments and thoughts and feelings than to just speak to the screen. But as of now, I don't know any other way to do this. So we're going to continue this way until we come up with a better solution. And I wish all of you a wonderful day. Much love. Shalom.